Welcome to Smashed Avo Property. Today we've got something a little bit different. Joey, being my buyer's agent, and I walk you through my most recent purchase, including the strategy, some of the due diligence, the thought process, the emotions, the cash flow position, and I even touch on some of the due diligence items I failed to identify before signing the contract. One of the things that I didn't really take into consideration, even though I had heard it from everywhere beforehand, was obviously there was tenants asking for rent discounts in the current environment. As always, seek your own professional financial, legal, taxation, and property investing advice for your current situation. Everything we talk about is just our opinion and general in nature and should never be considered as personal advice. So without any further ado, let's get house hunting with Joey. What is going on, guys? It is Jordan de Jong.
And this is Joey DeGarda.
And we are back at it one more time with a little bit of a different podcast today. Instead of rambling on about what we think and what you should do and what you should invest in and how you should invest and all of that sort of stuff, it's time to finally walk the walk. So I've been lucky enough to take advantage of the current pandemic environment and secure my third property. And Joey was actually my buyer's agent for this property. So I think in this podcast, we just kind of want to walk you through what happened with that purchase, what the thought process was, what the strategy behind it was, and all those sorts of plays. We don't have anything scripted or anything like that, so bear with us through this conversation, but hopefully between Joey and I, we can sort of pry each other to get some information out about what was happening and all that stuff along the process. But yeah, essentially, it's all well and good for us to sit behind the microphone and talk about all these sorts of things, but we also want to demonstrate that we're in it ourselves, we're investors ourselves, and we walk the path together. So how are you feeling about it, Joey?
Yeah, mate, you couldn't have opened it any better. So as you said, like we're here and we give some information as much of our knowledge as we can share with the audience. But yeah, it's great that when we can share some stories around us actually walking the walk and talking the talk at the same time. So yeah, congrats on the most recent purchase, and it's been a wonderful story and can't wait to share it with the audience.
Yeah, for sure. So to give you a bit of background, so I think it's actually been a long process. So I think we started this conversation maybe even October, November 2019. We were just in a good financial position and we were ready to sort of take that next step into moving to the next property. And I guess, the reason for me telling you guys that is, it sometimes it takes a long process. It's not as easy as, going to a property on a weekend, finding it and buying it on the spot. Like there's actually a lot that goes into it, especially if you've got an existing portfolio. So as we always bang on about, the first step for me was approaching my mortgage broker. Now, at the time, I'd been working with a mortgage broker that for the last 4 years, that's kind of, or 3 years maybe, that's, been good. But now that it's time that my portfolio is a little bit more complex, I kind of needed someone with a bit more oomph and a bit more, strategic ways and different ways of finding things and different ways to navigate in different lenders. And Joey was fortunate enough, after talking to Joey on this podcast, he told me about this fantastic mortgage broker that he had, and we'd both be more than happy to recommend him to anyone. But yeah, essentially Joey passed on the contact there, and we worked this sort of different strategy. And this is why we always say it's so important to have, an A grade.
Investment savvy. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. That's the word I'm looking for. Investment savvy mortgage broker. And essentially what he's been able to do is analyze my portfolio, see where we can potentially pull out some equity and use the funds that we've already got to leverage into that second property or third property. Yeah, essentially after talking to him, he put a strategy together for us, and we kind of had a little bit of an awkward play because we were renting out one place with my wife's brother and sister. And then we were also Airbnb-ing out some of our existing properties. So it was a little bit awkward. Like we didn't know how to really strategically play it. Obviously, banks don't really take Airbnb income unless it's, been running and operating for 2 years and has that solid rental return. So we had to just take that normal rental return for our existing properties, like a normal market evaluation. And then we actually waited until we moved into one of those because of this corona pandemic. We actually moved into one of the Airbnbs just so that, everything was a little bit more tight knit. So that's kind of why the process did take so long. And then we got approved and we were in the position to execute. And I didn't I think our original plan was to buy sort of a stepping stone principal place of residence. So we wanted to find a place that we could sort of, because my wife's pregnant now and she's due in September. So we kind of wanted a place to move into, like a little 3-bedder or something like that, to just be a bit more comfortable. But after thinking, for a while about our play and our portfolio, we already have 2 properties in sort of a closer vicinity, and that's in the northwest of Melbourne. And I was just a little bit, because that's generally where my wife's family grew up, and that's probably where we're going to be for the rest of our lives. And I didn't want to go again and buy another property in that area. And so this is another piece that we always talk about is diversification. And I've got one property in a trust account, I've got one property in a personal account. So I'm trying to, and you'll need to speak to an accountant about your personal circumstances, but I'm trying to lean away from heavy land tax bills, as you might say. So that's why the Sydney piece came into play. And, it really wasn't, I always said to myself, if I was to buy in another state, it would be with a buyer's agent, because I believe if you're purchasing a property, you need to have your boots on the ground. You need to understand the area. You need to know what's going on. You need to know the hotspots, the demographics, the walking routes, how, where's a cut through routes? They cut through a certain walkway to get to the train station, the local community, all that sort of stuff. There's so many things that you can't analyze on a computer. And although I'm a very data driven guy, I think there's so many things you can't just analyze, online somewhere. You actually need someone with the boots on the ground and knows the local areas, agents, and knows who's selling what at the current time, and has had that history. And thankfully, Joey and I pretty much talk every day now. Like we become really close mates. Obviously we do a lot of podcasts together, and we use the same contacts in the industry. So we're all kind of in this circle. And by speaking to Joey every day, he's like, look, I'm on the ground. I know what's going on. And he sort of walked me through that process. And I think, it's been a bit of journey from start to finish. It's hard to get your head around buying in another state, buying something that you can't touch and see and everything else. But I think once you get over that piece, and you look at the numbers and you turn it into a numbers game, it makes a whole lot more sense. So instead of me just rambling on, I will pass it over to Joey in a minute. But essentially the brief to Joey was, we were kind of looking for that sort of 60s, 70s built double brick apartment block, the type of properties that we suggest investing in, or we have done previously in certain podcasts. I wanted to be in that sort of eastern suburbs of Sydney CBD, on the eastern beaches there. I think that's a really nice spot. And I wanted a 2-bedroom. I didn't necessarily want a 1-bedroom. I was kind of looking for a 2-bedroom, but we ended up buying a 1-bedroom, and we'll get into why a bit further on. But essentially that was the brief. And I told Joey my budget. We had $500 to spend at that time. And I basically just put it in Joey's lap. And Joey, I guess, do you want to walk through how you operated as a buyer's agent when you get that sort of brief?
Yeah, so originally when we kind of started having a bit of a chat about it, I was actually in the middle of looking at some property just outside of the eastern suburbs, just a little bit further south, kind of near Brighton Beach, for those Sydney-siders listening to the podcast, only because I had a client that was actually looking in that vicinity, in that area. So as I was getting to know and chat with the agents and getting my hands on some of their off-market stock, I could see some of the properties were there and thereabouts, and they were just kind of above your budget for a 2-bedder. They were floating, around that 550, more pushing towards 600 mark for an average apartment, and obviously north of 600 for a better quality apartment. But as time went on, and fortunately for you there, Jordan, we dipped our toes more and more into the pandemic, I don't know, kind of blood on the streets period post-March. And that's when the market was a little bit shaky, and there was, to say lack of confidence would be an understatement. Just in terms of buyers and sellers, no one knew at all what was going on. Agents didn't really know what was going on as well. So we were fortunate enough that we kind of did see ourselves into that period, and it was unfortunate for the vendor. But yeah, the search kind of started there, as I thought. I mean, I was already looking there, and you wanted a 2-bedder, and I knew that the eastern suburbs, we weren't going to find a 2-bedder. Certainly not one that I would recommend buying anyway at that level. So I immediately thought let's look a little bit further south, was communicating that area with you, which you actually didn't mind. And then, it was just by absolute chance that this off-market one came up, and I got a great working relationship with the agent that ended up selling it. And I just presented it to you. And if you don't remember yourself there, Jordan, remember the first message I sent was, I know we wanted a 2, but would you have a look at a 1-bedroom apartment if it's in a good area? And I think the answer was yes. Look, show me anything. So
Yeah. I'll pause you there for a second. And I think, going on to, when you get an original brief and a price point, I mean, every buyer wants, the most bang for their buck, the most that they can get for their money. And, when you do come at that price point and you're looking in these sorts of particular areas, you do have to sacrifice some things. Now, the one bedroom play in the back of my mind, there's a couple of things that I don't like about them. The first thing is they only sort of have a limited amount of people that would tenant it, and it kind of limits that sort of resaleability and the people that would live in it and tenant it out as per se. And it only matches a few criteria. You can't have those sort of younger families. You can't sort of, it's in a double brick sort of complex, which you can't have the people, elderly, really elderly that might not want to walk upstairs, get into it and all that sort of stuff. So you do limit your potential future investors who might want to buy in it or owner occupiers that might want to purchase it. You also limit the tenants that want to come in. But at the end of the day, I'm going to sit and hold play. I'm not here to resell it again anytime soon. And it's a 30-year play for me. And, I'm comfortable with that sort of purchase now. I understand, what that rental market looks like there. And this is the thing about using a buyer's agent that knows the area as well is, Joey actually owns a number of properties in that vicinity, and some of them are one betters. And you can actually relay and have those conversations with the buyer's agent and just say, hey, listen, what do you think about a one better? And Joey will tell you that his one better is his best performer. And, it's reassurance like that makes you really grasp and look at the numbers instead of trying to think about all these emotional things that might impact your investment property later in the future. And
sorry, I was just going to touch on exactly what you're saying there. And it might sound like a lot of money that people, and why would you spend 5, 6, 650 on an apartment or a one bedroom apartment or a two bedroom apartment? But it's actually very common and it's the norm. And it's particularly when you're buying outside of your backyard to reach out and to get that assistance and to have someone on the ground saying, well, it's very, very normal for people to buy, rent and live in one bedroom and two bedroom apartments here in Sydney. It's particularly for our Gen Y audience, it's the norm and it's the standard, and no one's going out there and buying $1.5 million houses at the age of 25, 26, 27. They're living in those 1, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. So yeah, it's just important. Like, for example, as I've touched on in another podcast, if we're looking to buy in Brisbane, for argument's sake, it might not have been the apartment, it might not have been the property for you, but here in Sydney, it's a very, very sound investment and it's a very normal style of accommodation.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I'm just trying to relay the thought process back then. But yeah, now I'm completely convinced, and I'm totally happy with. I think we bought a banger. And given that brief and that history and what was happening in the current market, I mean, let's walk the listeners through the process of what was happening for that purchase, Joey. I mean, it was literally sent to you in a sort of a VIP emailing list.
Yeah, it was. Look, and it was ones that come through from agents every now and then to their kind of buyers agency database, sort of those who have inquired on similar types of properties. Not the biggest agency here in this part of Sydney, and so like a lot of people just discredit those emails. But I actually have a look at them, and I saw, gee, wow, that's actually all right. And it had one open for inspection and only one open for inspection. So went down, had a look, and was actually looking at one next door for that didn't have parking, and this one did. And so I was just kind of there to compare the two properties. And while I was there, was mesmerized, and my jaw dropped when I was kind of found out what the range or the asking price kind of was for that property. So that was when I immediately got on the phone to you and said, Jordan, I think this is one to seriously have a crack at. If I was in any position, I'd be buying it. I'd be recommending my brother to buy it. So, mate, 100%, I want you to have a look at it. So, and
I guess that's sort of what really reinforced, Joey's sort of thinking there is, he actually showed his best mate through this property before he showed me, because he was willing to recommend it to other people. He was willing to, recommend it to his family members and his best friends and all these other people. And I think, that really, really enforces how confident Joey was in this purchase. And I think this is the best thing that you can do when talking to a buyer's agent, if you are unsure about a purchase, is say, would you buy it for yourself? Would you buy it for a family member? And if they can confidently look you in the eye and say, yes, I definitely can, then you can have some confidence that, if they were in the position, they'd be buying it before you were.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as I told you, the reason why I was there was because I was actually on the hunt looking for a mate of mine, because that one bed brief was exactly what he was looking for. But just unfortunately, a first home buyer who's just not ready to actually go out and take that leap, who to this day messages me regretting not actually taking action. And I said, well, it's only going to sit off market for so long until it actually makes its way online. And when it's online, this thing is going to fly if it's advertised below $500,000.
And just a bit more context, we are, as Joey alluded to, in the middle of the coronavirus sort of blood on the streets. Like, everyone was terrified about what was happening. There was news articles, news media, everything was coming out, -10, -20, -30% drop in housing prices in Sydney and Melbourne. And, everyone was freaking out. So essentially it was a different market to sort of a buyer's market or a seller's market, or a usual buyer's or seller's market. This was unprecedented times. And usually I like to go for properties that do go into market, because you can sort of see who is reinforcing, who is standing behind you at the open home, who is, put their hand up for auction day. And, you can have that confidence that there are other buyers behind you. But when you're in an unprecedented market and times are a little bit different, we were just fortunate enough that Joey got the VIP email and we had that sort of backing there.
And Jordan, we were very lucky, particularly for this property, that, and for the listeners, the block just next door, without parking, was on the market, and I'm quite close with that selling agent, so I actually knew the owners of that apartment that was selling too. So I was very entrenched in this little pocket of Sydney, and as I said, I had a really good working relationship with the agent selling the other property. So having that there to really, and it was on the market. And as you've just touched on, then I went to a couple of those opens and I saw the number of people that were getting through. And that's what really, I was already sold, but it reinforced it for me, saying if people find out about this property, it's going to fly, because the one next door didn't have parking, ours did. And the number of people at this property without parking just makes me, 100% confident that we are getting a great deal just by snapping this up before it went onto the market. And you might lead on to it. That was kind of one of the things that we were treading carefully and making sure that we didn't overpay, but we didn't let the property actually run all the way through to market.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, at this point, I'm just trying to think back and relay the steps that we went through. We did execute pretty quickly. And there's a fair bit of due diligence that I did. And I don't think we'll touch on a few things in this podcast. But I have actually done a recent video that's about, 40 minutes long, of all of the online due diligence that I did for this particular property. So if you want to go check that out, you can go check it out. It's just Jordan de Jong on YouTube. My face will pop up somewhere, and it's just called How I Did My Due Diligence on My most recent property. But some of the things that I did check out is obviously all of the other things that you do look at. So, obviously being near the airport there, you got to look out for the flight path, distance to city, distance to transport, the supply on market, do all of your comparable sales and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's kind of where Joey is talking about now. And we were fortunate enough to have that sort of direct comparable sale in the same apartment block without a parking space, but we had that reinforcement on the market as well. If you want to list the full due diligence list, go and check that one out. But moving on from that, there's also other things that we went into, like a Strata Report and checking the building and all of these other things that you do along the process as well. And being a 60s building, there are a few things that you have to be aware of. They're double brick and they're solidly built, but there still are things that can potentially go wrong. And you can use that towards your advantage. But I think before we jump into that, Joey, do you maybe want to talk about how you negotiated on that price point? So I can't remember what it was originally quoted for, but you did pretty well to get it down.
Yeah. So look, obviously the agent had seen the one next door, and that was on the market, and they were guiding 500 for the one next door. And look, to be honest, in a normal market condition, that 500, it would have flown out the door. Those owners actually paid 510 for that property without parking next door to it, kind of back in the boom 2016, 2017. So our agent knew that next door was kind of going around that 500 mark. Obviously, as we were entering into the coronavirus period, that vendors were willing to take a little bit of a hit on the property. So the agent was kind of trying to play us off against next door and trying to base off what next door was going to get. So another kind of thing that was going on at the same time is that I was getting feedback from the agent next door because I'm quite close with him, and I was getting real time what the negotiations were currently at. So I knew where they were pretty close to settling on a price next door. Our agent didn't. And really fortunately for you there, Jordan, we kind of both exchanged contracts within 24 hours. So each agent didn't find out what each other sold for, because if our agent had found out that next door, which ended up selling for 475,000, had sold for 475, then they would have wanted a hell of a lot more than what we ended up paying for the property, because they didn't have parking and we did. And we were kind of probably in a better area. We had a better aspect of the park that was just next door to us. So it was really fortunate, and I was almost purposeful in timing that, only because I had the inside goss on when they were about to exchange contracts next door. So we entered very, very low. I did come in at 465, and it was a pure low ball. And I just said, and I used you and blamed you there, Jordan, saying that, look, it's I have to submit it. My client would like me to put it forward. I know it's not going to buy the property, but here it is. And submitted the offer, and it was fortunate timing that they came back and said that they were sticking in and they wanted 485, and already we'd got them down from around 500 to 485. So I've gone, okay, this is a great start. We've already got them down. We know we're not going to pay 465 for it. I've already told Jordan it's going to go probably closer to 480, but I'll try and start it with a 7. And then, as things progressed, the agent was able to get the vendor's headspace into that 480 level. And we were really close. Once she came back saying that the vendor would look at 480, I knew that we're in the box seat, because I had just been, kind of delaying everything a little bit and said, oh, look, I'm going to struggle to get my own up to 470, but I think I'll be able to get him to 470, and then we're close. We're only 10K apart. We'll be able to bridge this gap. Get that agent on your side, and that's the great thing about having a buyer's agent. I was able to you were able to distance yourself from the agent, and I was able to use you as my excuse for not being able to get them the price that they want. And that's, it was critical for me to be able to have that, and for you as well at the same time, to be able to distance ourselves. And so as push came to shove, she said to me, if you can get me 480, the property's yours. And I came back, and Jordan, I think I came in something, it was bizarre. It was 473,200. I said, that's right. I said, Jordan just got his bonus paid out early from work. So, and this is everything he's got. 3,200 is what he got. So we're increasing the offer from 470. So I've managed to give a 470 written. And from then I increased it by Jordan's fake bonus amount, which was 3,200. And I'm letting all my secrets fly here, Jordan. So presented that. It was a bizarre offer of 473,200. And look, the agent was really happy and was forthcoming in that I was able to squeeze out a little bit more. And she kind of went into bat with the agent and said, look, if we go to market, it's going to cost us anywhere between $4,000 and $8,000, depending on the type of campaign that we want to do. Like, I think if we can get them down to 475, if we can get them up to 475, we're doing really well. Convinced to get the agent convinced to get their buyer down to that 475 level. And she said, look, between you and me, don't tell your client, if we can get 475, we've got a done deal. I said, look, I'd love to get there, but we gave you everything that we had. But let me go back one last time. So this was about, I don't know, maybe 2:00 in the afternoon. Then as 5:00 came around, I don't even think I'd spoken to you here at any part of this, Jordan. It was back and forth over the course of, mate, do you remember 48 hours or something like that?
Mate,
and I said, well, look, you didn't even know the whole backstory. And I said, look, Mum and Dad have actually chipped in $600. We can get him to 473,800. By which point she's gone, look, we're $1,200 off. I'm going to push for it. And much to my surprise, I thought we were going to have to come up that little bit more. And I said to him, I was like, mate, if we can get it at 475, it's an absolute steal. Even at 480, it was an absolute steal. And much to my surprise, they accepted the offer there at 473,800. Very weird amount, but the premise was the $3,200 was the bonus. and then the parents chipped in an extra $600, and that's what got us to that level. Now, if you had have been there showing your face, you probably couldn't have been able to keep that straight face, and that's why having that third degree of separation would have helped. And yeah, it was a phenomenal result.
Mate, you did an absolutely amazing job, and 100%. And that's why leveraging a buyer's agent and distancing yourself, as Joey's saying, is so critical, because you don't have that emotional attachment. You don't have that look on your face. You can come up with these stories and leverage your way into different results. And that's the other thing about Joey as well, and the process that he went through. And when I say I didn't even hear from him, it's actually a good thing. And obviously, he told me what was going on the whole time. But Joey and I sort of had this little competition running in the background to see what he could get it for. And I think, that hiding me away from that, every step of the process, I'm so thankful that he didn't come and tell me, okay, well, the vendors are now at 475 at 500, because I might have just been like, oh, definitely, let's go, like take it 100%. But, Joey actually didn't even get me emotionally involved in the price point. He took a step back, did the absolute best he could to get the best price he could for me. And then I remember the morning that he contacted me and said, mate, the deal's done. This is what we got it for. I was gobsmacked. Like, I just couldn't believe the price that he got it from, especially, coming from that price that we originally had. So I think he did an absolute phenomenal job there, mate. And I couldn't recommend you enough.
Yeah, thanks very much. And just, I think it was maybe 24 hours later, as I said, that I got the text message from the agent next door, and he said, under contract 475. And I was just going, you beauty. Like, the fact that we secured this, a better property with parking for $1,200 less than the one next door. And I mean, parking here in Sydney is anywhere between 40 and 50 grand. Like, the agent next door said, I'm so thankful that you bought that, because if my clients had seen that you bought that for that price, they just wouldn't have sold. So, and he even said it, like, parking's 40 to 50 grand here in Sydney. So we've done phenomenally well, and you've taken advantage of the market conditions at the time, and you've put your trust in a professional, and the results absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, 100%. And I probably should have taken a step back before we did that negotiation piece and did walk through that Strata report. I was just too excited to get onto the negotiation process. And thanks again for giving away all your secrets there, Joey. But essentially, back before, when we were doing our due diligence, it's always super critical to get a conveyancer involved and check over the process and check over the Strata report if you do so. Now, I've got a conveyancer that I've used for my other property purchases. However, they're based in Melbourne, and really it's super critical to not only find someone in the local area, I think, in my retrospect, but also someone who has that experience of the local area and has done other contracts and other Strata reports in the local area. And thankfully, Joey's old man is a conveyancer, and he was more than happy to jump on board with the process. And I think, having the experience that he does in that specific area, there's certain things that he'd be able to identify in the contract that might stick out, where a conveyancer in Melbourne wouldn't be able to identify as not being right, or may be looking a little bit odd. And so, and this is why I talk about doing that due diligence piece as super critical, because there were things in the Strata report that we found that was a little bit of a concern. Now, obviously, the most immediate one was that the Strata was actually in a deficit, so they owed more money than they were getting paid out. Now, this amount was only $200 or something like that, between, I think there was 22 or something units in the complex.
Yeah,
It's really not that much, but what it does mean is the Strata levies are going to have to go up. So that's something that I've got to prepare for, and that's something that I have budgeted into my feasibilities and everything else like that. But without that sort of knowledge, you can't really identify that sort of stuff. So the second thing that we identified is one of the balconies in the building was being rectified. It had some water damage from the above balcony and was sort of starting to deteriorate. Now, that was a bit of a concern for me, because some of the other members were kind of talking about, oh, well, we'd like to get ours fixed and blah, 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 blah. But essentially, if we read into the report further, they actually sent someone out to check the structure and check everything, and the properties were fine, and they couldn't claim it. So the fact that it was just one balcony on the other side of the complex too, I wasn't too concerned about that. Obviously, I talked to about it with your old man, Joey, and can give him a little 5-second spiel if you'd like.
Angelo Degata solicitor, he'll come and visit you if you're here Sydney based, and he'll help with any conveyance across the state of New South Wales. And just to touch on there, he's not even licensed to practice outside of New South Wales. That's his jurisdiction. So, really important if you're buying interstate to source someone that you can trust, ideally locally.
Yeah. And so, sorry, I just wanted to give him a little spiel because he has been an absolute legend throughout the whole process. But yeah, we had that conversation and he said to me, look, at the end of the day, if all the balconies were to get completely revamped, it would cost 180 grand or something like that. And if you split that up between, I don't know if it was 180 grand, don't quote me on that, but it worked out to be about 6,000 per unit. So I wasn't too concerned about that, and that's sort of the worst case scenario. Obviously, over another 10 or 20 or 30 year period, it may cost that amount of money. So you just have to prepare for those things and be aware that they might come up. And when you're buying these types of properties, you have to really factor that into the feasibility. It wasn't 180, I can tell you that much. Yeah, it's super important to understand what are the costs that may be coming up in the future. The third thing that we were a little bit concerned about was there was a bit of bubbling on one of the internal walls of the bathroom in our specific unit. So what a bit of bubbling actually means is there's a little bit of water dampness there, and water can be a bit of a major issue at certain times and cost a lot of money to fix up. And essentially what happened is over time, the shower head or something behind the wall where the shower is just started to leak through, and it was a bit of a build up over the last 30 years. So it wasn't something that was super urgent and super important, but it was an issue. Like, it's something that had to be rectified. And what we actually managed to do was put in a special condition there in the contract that just says this must be fixed before we settle. And since then they have been actually able to do that. So they have actually rectified that issue. They've sent a plumber out. They fixed it out. He actually took the tiles off the wall and fixed all the things and made sure that it was everything was good and did the testing and all that sort of stuff, and then repatched it back up to brand new. So and that's why it's super critical to be aware of what's actually happening in your specific unit and try and get these things fixed before you purchase them. When you purchase a property, it's easy to presume that you're buying as is, and in most cases you are. But there are certain things that you can identify before you sign that contract, that you can say, hey, listen, I'm up for buying this at a certain price point, but these are the things that we'll have to identify and address before we settle. And I think Joey's old man's done an absolutely fantastic job with that so far. The only other thing that I think I didn't do specifically well was, so even though the price point was fantastic, even better, it was currently being rented out for $450, as so we thought. So it was leased for $450. I think it was like a year or two before that it was leased for $450. Yep. And I was gobsmacked. Like, I couldn't believe it. Like, it was probably positively geared on paper from the get-go. So, and I guess that's what, really drove our reassurance as well, Joey, there. But one of the things that I didn't really take into consideration, even though I had heard it from everywhere beforehand, was obviously there was tenants asking for rent discounts in the current environment. And what had actually happened is the current tenant in there asked for a rent discount, and it was $100. So they were paying $350 a week, which is significantly lower and has a massive impact on that cash flow position of the property. And I didn't actually check that before we had signed the contract. So luckily enough, it was actually in the cooling off period. So we had 5 days to pull the plug, although I would have lost my 0.25% put down there to hold the property. So worst case scenario, if I freaked out and we couldn't evict the tenant and they were going to be in there for 6 months, in the eviction bans, and I was going to be in a pretty bad cash flow position moving forward, I might have, but fortunately enough, again, we're really worked well with our solicitor, our conveyancer, Joey's old man, and we actually put into the contract that I was going to get a vacant property. So essentially, the current vendor gave notice to the tenant that was in there and says, unfortunately, we are selling the property and it needs to be vacant when the new purchaser settles. So we were fortunate enough there to actually not have to be abided by a current tenant paying a really low rental yield or a rental rate there. So that was probably one of the things just to touch on. And obviously we're in unknown circumstances at the moment. So it is a little bit touchy, and it's not something that you'd specifically do in every situation, although I would recommend always, checking the current tenant that's in there, checking, are they paying on time, how long they've been in there, what type of person they are, et cetera, et cetera. But luckily enough, we took action. And then again, this is where, your team is so important. Joey took action. His old man took action. Like it just, everyone was on point at all points in time. And essentially we got that into the contract. They've now vacated since. I think they vacated like 2 weeks after that. I talked to the rental manager and they were like, the house is spotless. Everything's really clean. So I was absolutely wrapped with. But the problem is then I was about to settle on a vacant property. And obviously that's not ideal either. So I talked to the current rental agent and said, listen, if you can lease it out, I've actually got someone else in the area that I know, a property manager in there, and Joey's actually recommended him. And I was going to give the property to him, but I didn't really want to sit on the market for 4 weeks, especially in the unknown conditions that we are in, and have to, get someone else in there for 400 or something, which was kind of the quoted range that we were getting at. I was like 400 to 410 or something like that. But I just said to the current property manager that was owning, I said, listen, if you can lease it out before settlement, we'll go ahead with you. That was the deal. And she literally had 2 open homes. The first one, she got some feedback, just said that the price point was too expensive. I told her 420 and I wouldn't accept anything less. So she got some feedback saying that the price point was too expensive. They were looking at sort of 395 to 405. And I was a bit bummed about that because obviously that impacts the cash flow position. But the second inspection, they actually had someone come through who loved it. She said the day was perfect, the sun was out, and everything was looking fantastic. And so we actually secured a tenant on the second open home. And essentially what happened there was they actually secured it for 420. So I'm super happy. I'm super happy with that price. Obviously, it's not that 450 initial expected rental return, but I'm still happy with the 420 because it is, and I think we'll get into this a little bit later, Joey, but it's cash flow neutral, I would say. It is cash flow positive, but I don't know how you define neutral. Is it like to the dollar being cash flow neutral?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you're ballparking neutral, but if you were going to get down into the nitty gritty, and you've broken your spreadsheet down pretty thorough, and it's actually come out $23 positive. So look, cash flow positive from day one. And if you want to give people a little bit of an overall LVR position for the property as well.
Yeah, for sure. So we actually did buy this on a 90% LVR. So we used a 10% deposit, which means we had to pay lender's mortgage insurance. And again, as we always say, lender's mortgage insurance, use it when you have to, avoid it when you can. And obviously we weren't in the position to avoid it, so we had to pay it, which is completely fine. All in all, the additional costs was $3,000. Well, that's still to be defined, but I always allow additional $3,000, at that settlement period to pay everything down. So the stamp duty was $16,773. I'm predicting about $9,000 in LMI and $3,000 in additional costs. So it costs me about just under 30 grand there to secure that property. Pretty happy overall with that purchase. And we got on a really low rate. We got on a 2.89% interest only rate there. It's interest only for 5 years, which is pretty normal. And we have actually fixed that one. We fixed it for a 2-year period. So, interest repayments are going to be pretty standard moving forward. There's not going to be any surprises there. Not that we're expecting the cash rate to go up anytime soon, but no further surprises there, which has allowed me to sort of lock in this cash flow position. As Joey alluded to, we're $23 in the positive here, and I'll just break it down so that you guys get a bit of an understanding what goes into cash flow. So we're renting it out for $420 a week. Now, what we do is, what I do is transfer that into a monthly repayment. And in that transfer, we actually only take a 92% occupancy rate. So what that means is that it essentially allows your property to be vacant for 4 weeks of the year. And that's generally going to happen if you're going into a 12-month contract and tenants come in and out and transfer hands all the times. You can allow up to a 4-week period there of not having tenants in there. So in total, that gives us a rental yield of 4.6%, which is quite high. So my total monthly income comes to $1,674, and that includes that 92% occupancy rate there. So my interest on my mortgage is going to be, and it's interest only, so I'm not paying principal here, but it's $1,004 a month. My management costs are going to be $84 a month. My management admin fees are $20 a month. Now, this completely comes down to who your manager is and what you should do. And I should probably just clarify there that I got my management percentage at 5%. So it is relatively on the low side there. And your management fees, you should just check with your property manager. They'll disclose everything for you, but you can see how much they're sort of charging you there as well.
Sorry, just to chime in while you're speaking about management fees, they are negotiable. So a lot of the times they'll start at, say, 7% or 6.5%, and you can bring them down. Like here in New South Wales, you can get 5.5%, 5%, 6%. But if you're paying over that, then definitely try and negotiate with them to a better rate.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for clarifying that one, Joey. My strata fees per month, and this is including that additional pump up that I know is going to come, is $209. My council fees are $90 a month. I haven't classified for insurance yet, so I am going to need landlord's insurance. I haven't factored that in, but I have added some buffers somewhere else that will account for this. So I don't know, Joey, how much do you reckon landlord's insurance would be per month, just to gauge?
On a property similar that I've got is $29.
Yeah, okay. So not a big impactor there. And the maintenance on the property, I've factored in $2,000 a year. Now, whether you're going to spend $2,000 a year or not, you're probably not. But essentially what that does factor in is over the years. So say over a 10-year period, you're building up a sort of maintenance buffer there of $20,000. And if something major was to happen, like that balcony incident, that would come out of that $20,000. So $6,000 out of there, only really 3 years. If I owned it for 3 years and they had to repair the balcony, then I'm still cash flow positive. So happy days there. But at least I do have a factor for maintenance in that one. And it comes to $167 per month. Land tax, I'm not paying anything on, which is great. Accounting fees, I've accounted for $17 per year. Now, obviously, that includes my tax returns and everything like that, and it's kind of just a breakdown between my portfolio, but it's coming down to $17 per month, sorry. ASIC fees are $0 for this, and ASIC costs me on one of my properties because it's in a trust account, so they're just the fees of having a trust and all that sort of stuff lined up. And my water fees is $61 per month. So in total, that comes to a total running cost of $1,651, which gives us that total positive cash flow position of $23 a month. So pretty happy with that overall. Joey, how do you feel about that?
Mate, we started this podcast a couple of weeks back, and we said that we don't invest for cash flow. We invest for the long term, and we're looking for growth, and cash flow is absolutely important because it keeps us in the game and it forces us, or it kind of keeps us away from a forced sale. So we definitely don't invest for just purely for the cash flow. But to be able to secure a property like this, 6Ks from the CBD that we know is going to grow over the time, we know it's going to grow because we bought it so far under what I would deem to be market value anyway. And it's cash flow positive. Like, mate, you've almost hit the holy grail. Like, it's everything that you want in one.
100%, mate. And I think, today we really wanted to show warts and all. We really wanted to walk through, the process that you go through, all the things, all the steps along the journey, doing your due diligence and all that sort of stuff. And although we haven't gone through a full list of due diligence, and maybe that can be one for us in the future, Joey, is just going through a full list of due diligence. This is how long the process takes. We started in November 2019, and now, we're not settling until July. So it's almost a full 9 months or something like that. It's pretty full on. And now obviously that's a longer term strategy there, and you can do it much quicker in some scenarios. But when you're going through a pandemic and all that sort of stuff, there's other factors that you have to take in. But hopefully that's given you guys a bit of a gist or a down low of all the things that actually go into making that investment decision, all the things that you have to think about before making that final step in. And although we're not saying, don't take the jump, do all these things before you do it, it is super critical to to run the numbers, do the feasibility, do the due diligence, do the research, use a buyer's agent if you're unsure, if you want to leverage. And that's why I've always said I'm more than happy to use a buyer's agent in a different state, because the work that Joey did for me, I could have purchased that property for 480 and I'd be happy. But Joey's actually secured it for me, $7,000 less than I would have. And if that doesn't show you how important a buyer's agent fee really is, and to be perfectly honest with you, like, it was originally advertised about 500, I think, or something around there. So
correct.
Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So who knows what I would have ended up paying for it? You know what I mean? And I just think that's why it's super critical to have someone with the skill and knowledge and the local area understanding and walk you through that whole process. So Joey, mate, you've absolutely killed it on this one. And I'm so proud to walk my listeners and your listeners through this whole process. So thank you again, mate.
Mate, as I said to you from the get-go, particularly with this property, it was one that I needed to go to someone that's close to me. Like, as I said, it was originally for my best mate. He just wasn't in the position to make that step and take the property off the market. But it was one that I just knew it needed to go to. It was just almost one of those circumstances where it was too good to be true. And yeah, I couldn't be happier for you. And as I said, congrats on it. And I think we're about a week off, maybe a little bit over a week off, settling on the property. And it's one that I hope you'll be able to hold forever, because you're going to see definite growth in it. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Mate, it's always a pleasure, and I'm loving these chats with you, mate. You're an absolute legend, and I think we drilled down into some pretty heavy stuff. There's always something else I can think of off the top of my head to walk through. So if there's anything that you guys can think of that you want us to talk about, please feel free to shoot them through. My email is hi@jordandeyong.com, and Joey's email is joey@estroproperty.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love some feedback. We'd love a 5-star review on iTunes if you're up for it. Or any sort of feedback. We just love it. We've been getting some incredible feedback lately, and it's really rewarding just to hear the stories of people getting inspired and learning and understanding the property investment game. So Joey, thank you for sharing your knowledge and your secrets today, actually, too. So we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks so much. And for any agents listening, that was a lie. That's not how I operate. I tell the truth 100% of the time. So disregard that. And thanks so much. And we'll catch you next episode, guys.
My wife and I wanted to say a massive thank you to not only Joey, but everyone in our A team that helped us secure this property. Without having them behind us, we would have never been able to execute in the way that we did. And that's why I always recommend having an A team behind you. I'm always looking for more guests to come onto the show. If you're under 30 and have one or more investment properties, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, I would love to talk to you about it. Even if you're interested into getting into the property sector, let's have a chat. The main focus is to help other soon-to-be young investors with tips and tricks along the journey, learn from the mistakes that we have made, and ignite the fire to set themselves up financially for the rest of their lives. If you're interested in sharing a story, you can go to jordandeyong.com/podcast, where there's a podcast inquiry button at the top that will guide you through the next steps. If you want to see what else I'm up to, you can go to YouTube and type in Jordan de Jong, where you'll find the Smashed Avo Property podcast being hosted on YouTube, and plenty of other content that I'm putting out consistently. If you're keen for more content like this, make sure you subscribe, and please leave us a review with any feedback for future podcasts. And until next time, happy house hunting.